Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Roxan Chen. Lovely to see you, Roxan. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Great, Simon. Good to be here.
It is, isn't it? Even on a Monday, right? Even on a Monday.
Today it's you have created a highlight.
Cool. That's lovely to hear. That's lovely to hear. But my mouse, I've had a slight technological problem here. My little mouse has just lost its life, so we'll have to charge that, set that in, and whilst we speak. So when we spoke last month, Roxan, and when we've spoken again today before we hit the record button, you've talked about this insatiable need for truth that you had, and I think that is it's something that really encapsulates something that we all feel as adoptees. You know, this need for truth. So can you tell us a little bit about your what that means to you? This word insatiability.
Sure. So when I was 15, some time ago, I was told, unfortunately, in an argument, that I was adopted. So as a result of that, I'm considered a late discovery adoptee. And for the following 5 years, I was mad at the things that I had heard about the circumstances, and it was my choice to be mad. My parents never spoke of her in anything less than a grateful way, but I was, a feisty teenager. I turn 20, I get married, and I'm a little bit more grown up. And one fine day, I decided that I needed to hear the story, whatever it was, directly from the lady that gave birth to me. And from that moment, my anger dissipated, and an insatiable curiosity that was almost palpable took over. And I was, this was before the internet and before Ancestry and so on. So I had to do a search with a telephone, a landline, a legal size yellow pad, and my own resources, whatever they may be, which was extremely uphill. But over maybe a couple of months' time, I found her. I didn't expect her to be receptive. She was very receptive. And when I ended the conversation with, "I'd like to come by and meet you this weekend," she was totally open. Needless to say, it was the longest 3-hour train ride ever. And I felt a curiosity that I can't even describe how strong it was. And when we finally met, which was, of course, very emotional, and we sat together, I thought that now I would hear truths, because I met the real deal. I met the lady that gave birth to me. And I found fairly quickly that her fear, shame, guilt, shyness, vulnerability prevented her from coming forth with all of the gory details. Because of that, over years that I knew her, she came to realize that I was never going to shout at her. I was never going to judge her, that I just needed the truth. But for the most part, she really couldn't tell me a lot of what I needed to know. For example, that I was one of a minimum that I know of now, a minimum of 6. I grew up an only child. I now have a sister born 3 years before me, a brother born a year before me, both of them I know. I have a wonderful, they're all wonderful, a sister born about a year and a half after me that lives on the West Coast, and 2 younger brothers who I know and know me, but we have not spoken on the phone yet. 40 years of curiosity can be actually both wonderful and consuming. So I find that my quest for truth is enormous. And I feel very much a right to it. I feel that maybe we don't have a right to yell, because, you're asking for the truth. Not every truth is, pretty. But in all regards, we have a right to open records. We have a right to get our documents should we want them. And that kind of painful, insatiable curiosity um, doesn't have to be quite so frustrating, because I think that we just need greater cooperation from one another, natural families, politicians, etc. So, as an adult who has found, some time ago, my mission is to see to it that in my lifetime, every U.S. state has open records. Could be for someone who's over 18 or over 21, but I think that that's absolutely critical, that we all have a right to our information.
Yeah. So can you take me back a little bit to the moment when you realized that that your birth mother's fear and shame and this toxic stuff going on for her
Yes.
was actually preventing her from sharing the truth? Was it? Do you remember a particular time when
Yes.
you recognized that?
Absolutely. I sat across from her at a Maryland diner that served soft shell crabs, which that state is famous for. And I opted to sit and have lunch with her. She wanted to go shopping, and I thought, that's fun for another time. But I just met her, and I sat across from her. I asked her about my older biological sister that I had heard about. I asked her about the boy that she had to give up just prior to me, in a very gentle way. And I just wanted to know about that. And she kept answering a very warm, friendly, I don't know. And I remember thinking, well, for heaven's sakes, of course you know. I would say to her, why was my sister, taken from you? How did that all play out? And she would give me some bits and pieces and then interject with, I don't know. And I couldn't believe that somebody couldn't know. I asked her about the boy that had to be relinquished. And the truth of the matter is that for the most part, she didn't know a lot about that. Social services had to, sort of come and take him. And, ultimately I found out 40 years later, place him in foster for a little while. But there were a tremendous amount of very fearful I don't knows, which I, realize in retrospect, some of which were accurate, some of which were, she just didn't want to, talk about the circumstances out of shame, fear that if I heard that she did something wrong or bad, that I wouldn't like her. And I was very touched that she liked me and wanted to know me and wanted me to like her, because she could have taken, a different position, but it was early on. So in subsequent meetings over the next many years, as we would get together, I would very sort of gently disperse, within the conversation, a few questions, with the disclaimer that whatever the circumstances were, I'm not going to yell and I'm not going to judge. Please understand that my need to know is enormous, but I will not fault you. Just need to know. And for the most part, she couldn't. That's my only criticism of her, that my insatiable need to be satisfied with many answers were sort of responded to with years of I don't know, and some blatant denials and some lies. Um, I've made peace with it, but it's still so many years later something of a frustration.
Yeah. Did you get the sense that she was maybe blocking this stuff out? It had been so bad for her. She, like, because it's
Yes.
yeah, like it's. I've heard all sorts of, because I'm fascinated by the whole consciousness thing and our awareness and how our mind works and all that sort of stuff. And people say, well, you're suppressing. We're suppressing stuff. We're suppressing feelings that are too hard to feel.
Yes.
I'm thinking, well, how do we know if we're doing that? You know, like, we're suppressing knowledge. We're in denial. It all seems really quite mysterious, and
Yes.
a place that we're not going to get to those answers about. People ask me stuff, and I say, well, I don't know. You know, I genuinely don't know. I can make up I can make up very plausible reasons
Right, right,
either way, you know.
right, right.
But
Yeah, but
I
until
think,
you know, you don't know. But there's a difference with you, Simon, who is not sort of purposefully withholding. You may not know, or you may not have come to that awareness yet. I think in her case that there may have been certain facts that she did know, but was, of course, in a state of trauma and denial and fear of the judgment, enormous fear of the judgment, which I kind of didn't expect. Later on in life, she absolutely admitted that, and I was honored to hear it, that I was the most understanding person she had ever met, and that she kind of knew that I wasn't going to yell or judge her. However, that did not cause her to come forth with truths, especially about the additional, babies that she had after me, or any sort of good information about the man that fathered me, to the point where I have come to the conclusion she probably didn't know. There is a good chance that she just plainly did not know who he was. And that's okay. I would have preferred, I genuinely don't know. I was, whatever it is, I was drunk, I was, with 3 people that week, I don't know, rather than some of the misinformations that she gave me that led me on wrong tracks to look for people that absolutely didn't exist. So the whole dealing with misinformation exacerbated my insatiable need for truth, because when you're satisfied, when you're getting it, okay, but when you're sort of thrown in wrong directions and not getting it, it just exacerbates it, increases it, and makes it much more of a problem.
yeah. So you also talked about an acceptance of that. So, sorry, just before I ask you that question, how long were you in reunion for before your birth mother?
Quite some time, from the time I was about 21 or so until my 40s. So we were friendly and kept in contact, not steadily, but well, for quite some time. And over time, she introduced me to a daughter that she had, who was not raised by her, who was raised by our maternal grandmother, my biological mother's mother, as her own. She had hesitated to introduce me, because she thought that I would be mad and hear things that weren't good and not want to be friends with her anymore. And that didn't happen. And my sister and I became very good friends and would visit each other frequently between New York and Maryland, or New Jersey and Maryland. And though we're less close now, that's one of, to me, the most special and soul satisfying sentimental friendships ever.
It's fantastic. So lovely to hear. So 20 plus years. So I guess the key point from that is if we're expecting the openness of our birth mothers to change over time, here's some proof that to some extent it does, and to some extent it doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, all circumstances are different. I entered the desire to search having come from a support group that I stumbled into at the time early on that would have monthly meetings called ALMA, Adoptees Liberty Movement Association. They still exist to some capacity, but they don't have in-person meetings. And through those fabulous encounters and meetings, I had heard and learned that once you meet your biological people, then the truth comes out. So I had an expectation, and unfortunately was disappointed that that wasn't the case, but always grateful to have found and met the people that I had met, biological mother, siblings, and so on. I think because that expectation was, kind of so strong from that information, it set the bar for you're going to get what you need now.
Yeah.
And that wasn't quite in place, though I was grateful for the reunion and truly did enjoy a very cordial relationship with her, which was unexpected.
Yeah. So was there a moment when you realized that I'm going to have to accept this? I'm going to have to live with this lack of information being forthcoming. I'm not going to continue to bang my head against this this brick door, this door, expecting it to open.
Yes, many years after she passed away, when I stumbled into a younger sister who I had asked her about, and she denied having, any babies after me. And then shortly thereafter, I encountered the paternal side, who was absolutely blown away that their uncle fathered a baby that he never knew about when he so dearly loved and wanted children and seemed like a decent, responsible guy. And came across to me from the talking of his nieces as somebody who is the kind of guy that just naturally was the sort of person that liked to save women. And she was the kind of lady that needed saving, so I could envision that, he encountered her, she sort of tugged at his heartstrings, and he in some way, probably looked to sort of help her or save her or maybe loan her some money or something like that. And that even if their encounter was very brief, and I don't know that it was, that they really didn't know each other quite all that well. Therefore, she wasn't able to convey, who he was. After she was gone for many years, and I was very, let's say, angry and upset, really upset, that all of these other children existed. I was happy that they existed, but unhappy that she couldn't tell me or tell me about the father. I recently came to reluctantly accept she did the best she could with what she told me, and she just couldn't. It was so uphill for her that she just couldn't. And I have recently reluctantly accepted her position in all of this. And I kind of feel sorry for her because I would have loved for her to see that she could have told me things that are, sort of questionable, and then I really would have been, a raised eyebrow here and there, but I would not have stopped speaking to her or been, unkind about it. I would have been very happy for the information. So 40 something years past meeting her, more than 10 years after she's gone, I came to gently, reluctantly accept that she just couldn't.
Yeah, it seems to be a theme that we've seen quite a lot of, heard quite a lot on the podcast recently. This theme of grace and like that, I think gentle forgiveness. It seems to be a big thing, and it seems to be a huge gift for ourselves, right?
Tremendous. It's the difference between darkness and light, having a brick on your heart and having it lift. I know in my case it's only 99% lifted, but it's tremendous, and I feel that it's something that we all need for ourselves to look to achieve. Grace is not easy. Forgiveness isn't always easy, but it's, I think, essential for our survival. Doesn't mean that things get sugar coated. It just means that we sort of, roll with it in a gentle and kind way.
To me, it seems to be something that you've, and this is consistent with my own experience as well. So that's maybe why it's ringing so true for me. Grace is something that we kind of see rather than we do.
Yes.
It's something that comes to us through an insight rather than something that's like an affirmation. I must give my birth mother grace. I must give my birth mother grace. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it's sort of two-sided. On one hand, absolutely yes. And then on the other hand, I've found that in many cases, adult adoptees, even if, the story is less than pretty, are really the most forgiving lot of people ever. And it's as though there's sort of like a little hint of innate grace that's built in, that I think is very helpful and wonderful. I saw a show about foundlings, babies who were, left somewhere, and when they went back 20, 30 years later to meet the person who did that, there wasn't a minute of anger or resentment. It was, I forgive you, I love you. And it made me cry, because I thought, my God, you were left in the cold in front of a church or a door stoop or something like that. And instantly, there's forgiveness. And I think that that's enormously wonderful.
Yeah. What do you see the opposite as the opposite of grace?
Maintaining anger and resentment, making up stories in one's mind that are probably worse than what actually happened. I was, from the time I was 15 to 21, I didn't have grace, and I was angry at hearing she had two before me. She did not, have a legitimate job. There were, sort of, troubles. And I was just, what do you mean? And I was kind of consumed with that constantly, until one day when I just developed understanding, maybe a hint of grace, and decided that my curiosity to know was really much more important, and anger was gone pretty much forever.
Yeah. Did you have any? You mentioned sort of classifying yourself as a late discovery adoptee because you didn't find out till you were 15. Did you harbour any anger towards your adoptive parents
Um,
about telling you earlier?
the anger that I had was disappointment that it came out abruptly in anger. It wasn't a sit down, honey, we need to, explain something to you, which, would have been appropriate. That it was blurted out. And when it was blurted out, my physical reaction was to feel like literally I was punched in the gut. My knees weakened. I didn't have my breath, and it was, a state of being that was like an inch before fainting. The shock was enormous, and I found fault, perhaps understandably, with that method. That she couldn't, let's say, control her temper. I have since literally made peace with that. No, it's not okay. It was a mistake on her part to do that. People have their frailties. I accept that she made a huge mistake, to the point where she went into denial as to, kind of claiming that that never happened, and that I found out some other way, because she knew she made a mistake. And I find great peace in making peace with that terrible mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the way anyone should find out, but here we are.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a sense there that both mothers were in denial to some extent.
Yes, very different personalities, very different lifestyles, but they both came with their frailties and their imperfections, as we all do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how has that how has that shaped your relationships with other people in your life? That grace, because presumably it's been like a transferable thing, hasn't it?
It does. It's trying and making an effort to always be empathetic, to always listen with an open mind and an open heart. I accept that not every scenario or circumstance is going to be, for me or appropriate for me, and that's okay too. But really, never to judge harshly. Balance between sort of putting up boundaries with things that may not work. Not everybody's frailties are going to be okay, but to sort of almost forgive them in advance for their imperfections, because we all have something, we all have our stuff. So I try to, and I think I'm naturally understanding, open-minded, and empathetic to people's stuff, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever we get near this subject, a story comes to my mind about an author and what do we call it? Yeah, like a speaker, a trainer guy, an American guy called Wayne Dyer. Did you ever come across this guy, Wayne Dyer?
Yes, I have heard of him.
Yeah,
Quite popular.
yeah. So he died a few years ago now, not too long ago. I think, I mean, the last 5 6 years perhaps. Um, did you hear him story? The story about him going to his father's graveside. Did you hear that?
I haven't, no.
So, apologies, listeners, if you've heard this one before, but it's very powerful. It's very powerful, and it goes to what we were talking about earlier on in terms of being grace is something that we see, rather than something that we do. It's not something that we try and yeah, the first sight of it's something that comes to us in the moment, and then maybe as Roxanne was saying, it's like a flame that we perhaps kindle, rather than something that we just try and do out of like a habit. So this guy, and Wendy was not, he was not an adoptee. It's just a story about grace. But his father was an alcoholic, I think, and left Wayne Dyer and his siblings and his mum to kind of fend for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't handle it, so off he went. And Wayne Dyer held a lot of resentment and anger towards his father for the way that he abandoned them. But many years, decades later, he ended up by a very strange series of fortuitous events. He ended up at his father's graveside, and his intention was to actually pee on his father's grave.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. He didn't do that. He basically, but he ranted at his father for 2 hours apparently, and then he tells this in one of your PBS specials, public broadcast services, television and specials. He describes ranting at his father's graveside and then having like a spontaneous forgiveness, a spontaneous great moment of grace, in which you're talking about that heavy stuff that we carry around, and that lifted off his shoulders.
Fabulous for him.
Yeah, and he credits that on his career really taking off, because no longer was he carrying a rucksack, a backpack full of this anger, resentment, and rage towards his father. So it's for me, it's really relevant when I think of just 40 seconds, right, in my life, 40 seconds of anger and fear related to my birth mother. And well, what would it have been like if that had been bigger, and how freeing it was for me when I, like Wayne Dyer, had a spontaneous, a spontaneous grace moment. It's really powerful. So it's something that we see. It wasn't something that he went on a mindset course. He doesn't try.
Right, it just happened.
It just
And
happened.
it's just about miraculous, because it wasn't planned. He wasn't, asking the universe for it. It just spontaneously happened, and it was obviously meant to, because it opened his world. It opened your world. I know that my forgiveness and peace opened up my world to just have a little bit better clarity. It's truly a blessing. I mean, it's almost, a miracle to spontaneously achieve that.
Yeah. And so what the listeners are doing by listening to us, hopefully, is they're putting themselves in the space where they're going to see something differently. That's what I'm trying to do with the podcast. With every episode that I do, I'm trying to say, look, here's something that Roxanne, here's something that happened for Roxanne. Here's something that happened for Wayne Dyer. Can that be a catalyst for a new idea, trying on something new? But I can't. We can't. None of us can give people insights. They have to be.
It's the only way. Yeah, it's the only way. You can't feed somebody something like that. For the most part, it really does have to come from within. And when it comes spontaneously, it's such a gift.
Yeah, and it is magic. It is magic. It is miraculous, and we can put ourselves in miracles' way. I guess
Yes.
that's what we're trying to do, and by by clarifying that it is magical, we're saying we're hopefully letting the listeners know that it's not something that they need to work at, right? It's not a grace mindset. It's
Right.
not something that it's not like hard work. It comes to you in a flash of inspiration. It's a thing that comes out of the blue. And as I think about what, if I was to sum up what you've said so far, the starting point for the conversation today was something you said last time we spoke, and that being the thing that you said was the truth will set us free.
Yes.
And what we're saying actually now is that, yeah, the truth may set us free, but we can be free without knowing the whole truth.
Absolutely. That would have been hard for me to accept at a certain point. However, I was very fortunate in that early on, the day that I found out that I was adopted and shocked, I encountered an acquaintance who was probably like an angel set in my path, who comforted me. I was shaking and crying and flipping out, and who are these people, and who am I, and oh my God, and all of this. I mean, just totally, off the charts, upset, in shock. And over the conversation, this teenager was very wise, and he looked at me and he leaned in after trying to comfort me in all kinds of ways, and he paused and he looked and he said to me, "But honey, you're still you." And it was huge.
Yeah.
And I have taken that and carried that within me for the past many years, because yeah, that is true. No matter who gave birth to me, didn't give birth to me, where I was, I'm still me. whatever that is. And somehow you kind of know who you are, even if there are moments of, questions. So between grace and groundedness, I do believe that with time and patience, one truly can thrive.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into what we're talking about before I hit record today. I was saying that the truth shall set the truth shall set us free can work on two levels. One, that the truth in the as in the truth of the story, the truth, and we're saying we don't need to get to 100% of the facts to be free. It's that's really good news, right? That's really good.
It's great news because
Right.
I did not always know that.
No.
I felt that I need 100% of bullet point truths and information. And while I think that we have a right to it and good if that happens, we will be okay with, a lot of truths. Doesn't have to be 100%.
So to me, then there's a part of our brain that demands the truth,
Yes.
and then there's another part of our brain, or more likely a part of our heart, which is the grace and accepting bit, which
Yes.
means that we can kind of put the brain's insatiability on the back burner to some extent.
Or just sort of calm it a bit.
Yeah.
I think it'll always rear itself in some way or another, but hopefully in a way that doesn't cause anguish and distress.
Yeah. So we can calm it, we can assure it that it's okay, not knowing, but that insatiability, it's like if we're gripped with that, that grip's going to keep us hungry, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So on one hand, the truth that the truth will set us free in terms of the circumstances, and then on the and as well as that, there's the truth about who we truly are. That sets us free. So this is a kind of a more profound truth. It's the
Deeper level.
deeper level, yeah. So and you kind of alluded it to you alluded it to. That's what your angel pointed you towards, really.
Unbelievable.
He said, or he or she said, you're still you.
Unbelievable. It was great. That was just fantastic.
Yeah. So this is a tricky one, but can you put that identity, that you identity, into words? Is that, or a metaphor, or
Um, Not easily, actually. It's just sort of like a comfort with I'm me in all of my, humorousness, curiosity, my ways. It doesn't really change whether I know or I don't know.
so
There's a core of me that's always there, um, good, bad, or otherwise, that doesn't necessarily waver with or without information. And it was enormous news to realize I'm still me,
yeah.
whether I'm, adopted, whether the parents that were raising me are biologically connected, whether the lady that gave birth to me is willing to meet me or not, willing to share truths or not. I'm going to navigate all of that as whoever it is that I am. And while there will be evolutions and changes, throughout life and maturity now, whatever has gone on or will go on, I am truly still me. And that was very grounding and very comforting.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful that I heard that at 15 years of age, and the subsequent years could be comfortably propelled by that.
yeah. So this is the constant, unwavering truth of who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is hard to put into words. And
It is hard, because then I have to, sort of, describe, who I am. Who do you think I am? It's just the core of my being is.
yes, so
I'll find out interesting things like my ethnicity and so on, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, change things tremendously, other than the joy and the satisfaction of knowing, because I like knowing. And I have found out a tremendous amount over the years, and I'm just fascinated with all of it, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise.
yeah. This is a bit of a weird question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So,
Go
is
for it.
this the sort of that some people go to? Could you imagine this being the sort of you that people go to the east, to India, to find? I'm going to find myself.
Yes, actually, possibly that is the case. There may be, I don't want to say, there may be an unknown within them where they strive to go elsewhere and put themselves in a circumstance where they can sort of relax and let themselves in. And I'm all for that, and I would do something like that. But at the same time, I don't have that specific need.
So but people don't. I mean, there's loads of stories of this nature in the different texts. So the one that comes to mind is oh, it comes to mind and then it disappears. So
Eat, pray, love.
sorry, eat,
Eat,
pray,
pray,
love.
love.
Okay, tell me more.
That was a movie that was a true story about a lady who spent over a year traveling to three destinations. One of them was India. And through the experience, she, in her own wonderful way, found herself.
Yeah, I was thinking of the parable of the something son. The oh, so it's the story of the guy who goes out into the world to find himself and then doesn't find it. He comes home and he had it already. It was already right under his nose.
Interesting, interesting. So he ultimately did in a way that was not anticipated. That's also very profound.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not a thing. That's why it's difficult to explain. That's why we need
Yes,
to have a parable. That's why we have to have a metaphor. So
right.
the metaphor that I use is this diamond, the Thriving Adoptees logo. It used to be one way. It used to be like an arrow onwards and upwards kind of stuff. And then because I found myself sharing the diamond story and the diamond metaphor so much, I thought, well, why don't I just make the logo for Thriving Adoptees a diamond, right?
Mhm.
So the um, when I'm doing this, I I'll hold my fist up to the the camera.
Mhm.
Doesn't work on a Zoom. And I show a clenched fist because you talked about anger. When I came out of the fog, it was the trauma manifested as anger.
Mhm.
The clenched fist is ready to punch somebody.
Absolutely.
It's primed. It's angry, right? It's angry. But the natural innate position of our hand is not clenched. So as the fingers unfurl and go back to their normal position,
Oh, fabulous.
it reveals the diamond that was hidden by the anger, by the trauma. So I'll put a link.
All along.
I'll put a link to the video on the show notes, because that diamond is that's who we.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is such a fantastic, true visual. Bravo for sharing that. That is fantastic, and it's so true. And to have a visual satisfies the soul.
It satisfies the soul, and it satisfies the brain as well. I think
Yes.
the brain can't get its the brain can't get its head around things, right? It's in our head, and it can't get its head around things that aren't things.
Right.
So I kind of teed you up by saying it's difficult to is it difficult to express this you-ness, and
Yes,
you agreed, and yes, it is. Yeah, it's difficult.
it is. But you did.
It's not a thing. Yeah, and this is what we're playing with here. We're playing with a metaphor for who we are, and in the same way as the truth will set us free works at two levels, identity works at a multiplicity of levels.
Yes.
And but what we're looking for is the core. You said the core me that's always there, that doesn't waver. So this core of who we are is the truth of us underneath our trauma, despite our circumstances, underneath our feelings, unchanging, whilst the voice in our head is always saying different things.
Sure.
It's unchanging, even if we are calling ourselves. I am calling myself Simon Jonathan Ben or David Anthony Flower, right? So my birth mother called me David Anthony Flower. So that's who I was for the first 5 weeks of my life. And then I was Simon Jonathan Ben. So is it any wonder that identity can be so difficult?
Absolutely.
When we've had two names. Did you come across a name that, did your mother give you?
Well, that's quite a bit of a mystery. A few years ago, for the first time, I got my hands on my original birth certificate, which, being born in Maryland, is not supposed to happen. But I think I gently wore down the governor.
You rang them every 2 days, didn't you? Something?
Yeah, yes. And I wrote to them every week, sending a check, sending a form, sending a letter. And when they would send it back and tell me I had to go to court, I would just resend it. And I was determined that I was not going to stop until I got it. And then one fine day, I got a call with somebody from Maryland wanting to reconfirm my street address, as she was going to send me a copy of my original birth certificate. Why I needed it was I needed to sort of prove that indeed there were 2 live births prior to me, and that information was on the birth certificate. But to my surprise, I found that my first name was my first name, which I didn't expect. So I believe that when my parents met her, which they did twice, once while she was pregnant, once right after she gave birth to me, that they may have made mention, if it's a girl, we're going to name her Roxanne, with a bit of a unique spelling. So I was rather surprised when I got my original birth certificate to see that the first name was Roxanne, there was no middle name, and the last name was the name of her, her maiden name at the time. However, further down in the document, she ended up giving a false last name for whatever reason.
Oh,
So be it. I did not ask for the birth certificate to get her name, as many people do. Fortunately, I didn't get it early on. Otherwise, I would have been looking for somebody that doesn't exist. But I was rather surprised to see that my first name was my first name. And the story that I tell myself is my parents must have shared what they were going to do.
yeah.
And when she was called upon to, make the birth certificate, she utilized that first name. Great.
Wow. I guess the thing that pops into my head on the back of that is wow, what what persistence, right? What persistence. So although we're talking about, we're talking about spiritually kind of things, or diamonds and going to the east to discover sort of stuff. This we're not saying that healing and finding answers falls into our lap without effort. It's about sticking at it.
Yeah. For the most part on this topic, we have to work hard. That was my experience, and that's been the experience of, over the years, many that I have spoken to. Some people are at it for weeks, some people are at it for years. They get upset, they have to take breaks, but that curiosity causes them, even though they're, stressing about it, to sort of go back in and find various different methods to achieve the find.
Yeah, and that's because, I guess, because the bureaucracies are set up. Well, they're not set up to give us information, are they?
Unacceptable. Yeah, that I'm determined to see change in my lifetime across the board. Many US states are now open, some remain not. And I find fault with that. We have a right to our information. Why shouldn't we have an original birth certificate or our original records if they're, agency related? So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's I feel strongly about that.
Are you involved in any groups doing that, Roxanne?
Right now, no, because they're not quite in place. So on my list of things to do, which I look at daily, early 2024, I'm going to immerse myself. And if I find again that there aren't specific groups to that goal, I will create one and see where it goes, because I found that as much as I can do things on my own, we do kind of need a team. We need more than one person to sort of get involved. So that absolutely is on my list, and I hope by the end of 24 there's some sort of progress. That's the goal. That's the hope.
Okay, so I just published a podcast today, with that I recorded yesterday with Aubrey Jackson, and she's on the board of Adoptees United. So it's adopteesunited.org, and I'll put that I'll put that link in the show notes,
Okay.
listeners. Um, so so Adoptees United are about equality for all adopted people. So it's a US based organization, and yeah, it's all about the rights and the original birth certificates. So it's run by the executive director is a chap called Greg Luce, who's been on the show before. If you yeah.
I recognize that name. I must have encountered him through my journey and through my searches. I do know that name, and I think in the past I may have corresponded with him. He's not an attorney by chance, is he?
He is, yeah.
I think I know him. I mean, not know him well, but I think I've communicated with him in the past. And I thank you, because I will reach out and reinvigorate this desire.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm conscious we've been chatting for almost an hour here. Is there anything that I've not asked you about that you'd like to mention, Roxanne?
You were very kind. Um, I was what they call gray market, which is sort of a gentle and polite term for not agency and done sort of in a private realm. Um, some people think of that as, you know, as being sold, and there may be some truth to that. So another one of my goals for the near future and mission is to take a closer look, and this sounds very dramatic and it's not meant to be, take a closer look into various aspects of human trafficking, choose an aspect of it, and also reinvigorate my interest in, you know, trying to see reform and change in that regard. Um, because I think obviously it's you know, necessary to sort of put a stop to that and not have adoption be a business when money is involved. And you know, it's, you know, money is all wonderful, but when money is involved, often the best interest of the child or baby is not foremost, and that does need to be foremost.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for sharing the last hour with us, and your wisdom. I think it's led me to some new thoughts on this, especially on this necessity for all the facts. You know, the peace and the grace are huge things that we're all searching for. And what if they are what we are, right? So thank you, Roxanne. Thank you, listeners. We will speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Simon.